Hey guys, it's Robert Hall, and in today's video, I want to talk to you about why I might never use high-speed sync again.
I'm now editing this video and I'm realizing that you may have a complete understanding of high-speed sync and just want to know what the product is. So if you're interested in just getting to that point, then go to this point in the video. And if you don't have a strong understanding of high-speed sync, then instead I would urge you to watch through this video until we get to the demonstration. That way you guys can see why this product is so valuable.
High-speed sync is an extremely powerful tool. It allows you to get past the sync speed of your camera, which gives you back the control of your shutter speed when you're using it with flash, and that's especially powerful when you're outside photographing in bright conditions. Without high-speed sync and having a shutter speed of around 1/160th to 1/250th, you have to rely on only your aperture and your ISO to balance with your flash. And when you're in really bright conditions outside, that could mean using an aperture as high as f11 or f16. The problem with that is you might not want the visual aspects of f16, where you show all the detail in your background. So many people rely on high-speed sync for getting an extremely shallow depth of field, but it comes with one problem, which is efficiency loss. As soon as you go into high-speed sync, your flash loses a significant amount of output potential, which just means that in order to use high-speed sync, you need a more powerful flash outdoors, which means a bigger flash outdoors, which means more work to carry, more chance of it falling over, more chance of it being damaged when it hits the ground, more chance of you requiring an assistant. There's so many things that kind of domino from having to use high-speed sync. And I found that that has affected my workflow a lot. I really like using light and nimble flashes, especially when I'm outdoors, such as the Godox 8200. That's been for years now my favorite flash because of its small footprint. And it's actually a quite capable light at balancing with bright conditions, at overpowering the sun in traditional sync. As soon as you get to high-speed sync though, it doesn't quite cut it. You have to have it right on top of your subject, and as soon as you pull it a couple of feet away, it's just not capable of delivering the light output you need in high-speed sync to balance with a bright outdoor day. So an alternative to HSS in the past has been using ND filters, and many people still use them today, because when you put an ND filter on your lens, you bring down the total ambient of light. You can do so to the point where you can still use traditional sync while getting a very wide aperture outdoors, but it requires a very dark ND filter such as a 4 to 6 stop ND. If you don't know, ND stands for neutral density, by the way. ND filters have their own problems, such as if you put a 6-stop ND filter on the lens of a DSLR, then you're barely going to be able to see anything through that, and your camera's going to struggle to focus immensely. Now that visual aspect of not being able to see through the viewfinder, that's solved by using a mirrorless camera. By using a mirrorless camera, even if you put a 6-stop ND filter on your lens, as soon as you modify your settings for that, you're going to be able to clearly see your image. And for the most part, they can focus just as well with an ND filter on. So I've been toying with the idea of getting back into ND filters so that I can utilize smaller flash equipment for my on-location sessions, but thinking about it, I have like 6 different lenses that I tend to use outdoors, so it would be extremely expensive to buy maybe a 4 and a 6-stop ND filter for each lens filter thread that I have. That means carrying 12 filters, which not only would be extremely expensive, but would also take up a lot of space in my bag. But I think I found a solution that both allows me to avoid HSS and get back to a smaller flash footprint, and allows me to avoid purchasing multiple ND filters for multiple lenses. And before I get into a review of it, let me just show you guys how it works.
Today I want to show you probably my new method that I plan on using when I'm working in direct lighting conditions like today, where it's completely blue sky, not a cloud in the sky. The sun is directly overhead. It's 1 o'clock, it's like 90 degrees. It's brutal out here. These are really rough lighting conditions to work in, but we're gonna try to make the best of it. Now, when I'm using flash in this type of situation, there's a ton of different restrictions that you're working within. So the first restriction would be your camera's sync speed. Your camera's sync speed is normally 1/160th to 1/250th of a second. When you're working in a situation like this where it's really bright outside and you're limited to 1/250th of a second, that means you're stuck at a very high aperture. So for instance, in this situation, photographing Clarissa here, in order to get the background how I like it to look, I am at f13, which means everything down the street here is going to be really, really sharp and in focus. And that's not really the look that I want to get. So I'm definitely going to use the strobe, and today we're going to use a 600 Pro with a 48-inch softbox, a very big 4-foot softbox. We're going to bring that in here. So now I'm going to figure out what power I need with that F13 to get this balanced. 1/2 and 1/3, so half power plus 1/3. Clarissa looks great, everything looks great in the image. However, at F13, like I said, we see all these distracting elements down the street, and that's really not the look that we're going for. So instead, I'm gonna use high-speed sync. So by going into high-speed sync, I get past a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, and I can essentially use anything, all the way up to my max. What that allows me to do is, instead of having an aperture of F13, I can drop that down and balance my exposure with a really wide aperture and a really high shutter speed. So we're gonna do that right now. So I'm dropping all the way down to, we're gonna go to F2, and I'm bringing my shutter speed all the way up to 1/8000th of a second for roughly the same exposure. Now that we have the aperture down really low, is a much better look in the background. We don't see all of these distracting elements and everything. My background is nice and dark how I like, but the light on my subject does not look good enough, so I have to bring this light even closer. So now that this light is really close, one of the negatives is that it's a little bit tougher to work around. And still, at full power, this close, which is really restrictive, there's still not the amount of light that I'd like to have on my subject. I wish there was more. So the problem that's happening is that HSS actually reduces the efficiency of your flash. And by having that reduction in efficiency, that just means you have to keep your light closer or at a higher power. So really, the best of both worlds would be able to have that aperture control, but not be in high-speed sync. And the only way to do that is with an ND filter. So this is a 6-stop ND filter, and as you can see, it's tiny. It's designed to slide in right over the sensor of my camera, which I'm going to install right now. Now it's actually not that complicated. Kind of line it up over your sensor, and then you press down, and that's it. Now my sensor has a 6-stop ND on it, which means I don't have to have my shutter speed all the way up at 1/8000th of a second anymore just to keep my aperture low. I'm all the way down to 1/250th of a second, ISO 100, and f1.6. Now I'm going to show you, if I leave the light at full power, how much efficiency we gain back from the flash. Awesome. Now my subject is way too bright. She's like blown out because of how much more efficient the flash is. So now I have a lot more control. I can either bring this light back, I can drop the power settings and have a faster recycle rate. There's so many different things I can do simply because the ND filter is not forcing me to use HSS.
This video is sponsored by Adorama, which buys me the time to create these type of videos without the influence from any specific camera brand. I personally shop at Adorama for their great deals on a wide selection of products, as well as their support of those products down the road. So if you end up being interested in any of the gear discussed in this video, please use the links in the description below. So using that 6-stop ND filter is a really simple process, and it gives you back that efficiency that you would lose using high-speed sync, which again either allows you to utilize smaller, less powerful flash equipment, or just gives you more flexibility with your flash equipment because you can bring it further away from your subject when you're balancing with bright outdoor conditions. Now, if you're scared about putting this directly on your sensor, let me just say that if you're unwilling to clean your own sensor, then maybe this isn't for you. But for the most part, it felt extremely simple, and it's completely happening above the sensor. So there's still a tiny gap. So you don't really have to worry about like scratching your sensor unless you're clumsy. You do want to take good care when you're putting something right above your sensor, but for the most part, I feel like I was comfortable enough doing it outdoors, and in a closed environment right on my desk, it feels really no risk. Now, when shooting with it, I didn't really experience any different feeling when focusing. It felt just as fast, and it felt like it was constantly finding the eye when I was using eye autofocus.
I was using eye autofocus for all of these, and yeah, it's performing as if normal. And you can see as normal too on a mirrorless camera because, well, your EVF is already compensating for the difference in exposure. So once you dial your settings back to compensate for the ND filter, your viewfinder basically knows no difference than as if this were normally settings applied to a brighter image. It's also worth noting that when you're using eye autofocus, you're only getting like a tiny bit of information, so other focus systems are going to perform even better because they have more space that they can acquire information to focus on. So if eye autofocus works, then you can pretty much expect the rest of your autofocus systems to work wonderfully.
But ultimately, I am absolutely thrilled about using this. Just the idea of not taking 8600s out with me, maybe not even 8400s out with me when it's really bright outside, and being able to get away with just an 8200, that just sounds incredible. I mean, I was doing backlit sunset portraits using the Godox V1, which is a speed light. So I know that an 8200 will be fully capable even outdoors at high noon.
And I'm back again because there's one more advantage that I didn't mention about this filter, and that is that because it's for a sensor of your camera and not for a specific lens or filter size, because it's not going on the front of a lens, there's actually a lot of lenses, specifically wide angle lenses, ultra wide lenses, that this works better for, because those wide angle lenses might not accept a filter at all, or if they do, they require a very expensive mounting system for that filter. I'm thinking about lenses like a Nikon 14-24, Sony 12-24, that type of lens. There may not be any filters available for them at all, but with a sensor filter, it completely mitigates that issue.
If you're interested in these ND filters, they're available from STC Optics. I've got them linked in the description below. No, this was not sponsored or any deal or sent to me by STC Optics. This was something I found and thought, that looks really cool. I'm going to buy it instantly because I think it's going to be great for my workflow. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please hit that like button below if you did. If you want to see more of my videos, consider subscribing. Comment below with any questions. And until next time, keep on shooting.